Language lends language to life, without which life is lifeless. It's a medium of social interaction. It's a huge, vast, and a diversified subject, not confined to phonetics and phonology only, not restricted to the vibration of vocal cords only, but a subject that is a matter of deep and profound research. It has been the source of interest for all linguists that have passed and the linguists that are in the contemporary world also. In the first part of our discussion about linguistics, we talked about some elementary information, and in the second one, we'll talk about applied linguistics, that when language becomes the medium of social interaction, what different changes it undergoes. And again, we have invited Professor Shafi Shok, known for his contributions in the field of language and literature, Dean, Faculty of Arts, Kashmir University, Professor Shafi Shok. Welcome, sir. Welcome. So when language that till now is confined to literature only, when it becomes the medium of social interaction, we come across sociolinguistics or psycholinguistics or ethnolinguistics. What are the changes and what different world do we find?
Since it's a question about applied linguistics, how the insights in the field of linguistics are useful, are applicable to our different problems in other fields of knowledge. For instance, as you rightly said, linguistics has always been a part of the literary discussions about literature, because it was always a part of it. But now in modern times, when linguistics has undergone several revolutions and it is definitely a systematic science now, its applicability is seen in other fields also. For instance, as you rightly said, sociolinguistics. In this field of study, we study the evolution of a linguistic community, the cultural changes in a linguistic community that have modified its surface structure of that community, that it is identified this way or that way. But before this visible form, it has undergone through a succession of changes, and linguistics helps us there by the process of reconstruction. When we reconstruct old words, we can trace down the evolution of a particular linguistic community. So since language is the expression of a community, of the cultural state of a community, the culture remains always in change. For instance, it gets influenced by all those cultures which come into contact either by need-filling motive or prestige motive. When the words are not there and new things are adopted by a particular linguistic community, we adopt that nomenclature alongside the things that we adopt. That is the need-filling motive. And then another thing is prestige motive. When we imitate the the ruling class, the dominant cultures, it becomes the prestige motive that stimulates change in the language of the community. In both ways, language remains changing, reflecting the socio-cultural state of a particular community. And if we see sociolinguistics in this perspective, we say that every language is adequate to the community, the culture of the community, the cultural needs of that community which speaks it. So no language is superior or inferior, so no language is greater or smaller that way, because even if the community is very small, the language is also very small. It reflects that cultural.
So when linguistics is taken beyond the academic confines, then it becomes applied linguistics, when it becomes a medium of social interaction. So of late, the biggest revolution that humankind perhaps, has witnessed so far, and that is the revolution of computers, technological revolution, that has not left any field of our life Talking particularly about language, the hybridization or the
Yes.
mongrelization of languages, when structures of languages leak into one another, is it a concern for purists?
And for purists, it may be a concern, but is an inevitable process, because as I said earlier, the language is always in a process,
Of change.
it is a process of change. It is a process, not a state. Language, it is a process, continuous process. So, if in future or at the present, our traditional, that puristic concept of language, sentences, punctuation, word formation, and other things gets violated, there is no harm if it adequately expresses our opinion. For instance, our teenagers, the language our teenagers use in their emails, they may be having complete mastery over English grammar, but they don't bother about punctuation, they don't bother about the spelling, they don't bother about the grammar. But this has evolved as a new kind of language, and so there is no harm. Nobody can.
Is it structuralism redefined?
Maybe yes, that way you can interpret it definitely.
Because the whole edifice of language, the whole structure of language has got disturbed to such an extent that we are not able to see one language in one perfect form.
In every language we have different dialects. Let it be called a different dialect. Computational dialect. So it's a different dialect. It has nothing to do with the literary dialect. In the same emails, in the same computer, if you have different websites of poetry, you have different websites of short stories, there you have the highest standard of language that is kept in untouched, or they may be excelling in that literary forms there in those websites of poetry and fiction. But this website, this usage of language, emailing, if you are aiming brevity, precision, and immediacy, then you need not bother about the punctuation, spelling, and it will be evolve as a different dialect.
So one term that's associated with the science of linguistics is language lab.
Right.
As a student, we say that labs are meant for putting some scientific observations to experimentation. What do we do in a language lab? Because language, as we see, is all art.
And so the concept of language lab, for instance, the studios, this surrounding that we're sitting in,
acoustics, etc.
Definitely, this is a language lab in itself. But there are different levels of language lab. You may be surrounded by computers, you may be surrounded by tape recorders and transmitters and different other things. Translators, you have the concept of computational translation also now. You may be having lexicons in your chips, and everything is there in the laboratory.
Is it a mechanical support, buttress to language?
Buttress to the language, and it is helpful also in not only in acquiring different languages, but also applying them to different problems. For instance, in medical science, if you are confronted with a case of aphasia, when the linguistic competence of a person, a diseased person, gets disturbed, how linguistics comes to your rescue, and you solve the problems with that sentence making competence in the patient gets disturbed, how linguistics can be applied to set it right. And so this is another aspect of the same language laboratory. So there are different levels, but in an ordinary laboratory, you may be having tape recorders.
That will also act as a language
television
lab,
and a computer. That is the lowest level of a language laboratory.
Professor Shafi Shok, 6,000 languages, recognized or recognizable language spoken the world over.
Right.
And there's a surprising imbalance that 96% of the people speak 4% of the languages and the vice versa.
Right.
So does this imbalance of languages lead us to extinction of certain languages which are not spoken or written? What is this death of language or death of words all about?
As you rightly said, certain languages are as big as all the languages put together. For the Mandarin Chinese, it is spoken by 720 million people in China.
So they hog the whole map of the world.
If you put together English, Spanish, the largest language of the Bengali, Arabic, everything, all the languages
Persian.
put together, it is more than that. It is more Mandarin Chinese, and
Mandarin.
you have different dialects of it: Cantonese Chinese, Shanghai Chinese. They are dialects of Mandarin.
Mandarin
So
Chinese.
Mandarin is the biggest language of the world. The second comes English, the third comes Arabic and or Urdu, and the fourth comes Bengali. And also Spanish. So all these languages put together cannot compete Mandarin Chinese. But at the same time, Mandarin Chinese is not overrunning other languages. It is not overrunning. It is a people that speak that Mandarin Chinese, unless there is some cultural onslaught on the other languages, there are political catastrophes that overwhelm a particular community, languages are not disturbed. It is political calamity, war, destruction, as we happen in the world today. Certain superior nation, dominant nation overrun smaller nations and get them
When humans are
annihilated.
snuffed out, languages wipe
Language
off
also.
themselves.
Language otherwise has not a physical reality. Language has no physical reality. You cannot call that is language. And a thing is not language. It is within the people who speak that language. It is not the lexicon, it is not the dictionary, it is not the computer. If you destroy all linguistic computers, if you destroy all lexicons, but the language still exists in the minds of the people.
Language as a colloquial medium to interact with the people.
Yes.
But language as a means of language as literature has a possibility to die if those things will not be preserved.
Yes. So you can preserve the old culture. You can preserve a dead language. You cannot preserve a living language. Living language is as vital, as living as the people who speak it. So it is within the mental framework of its speakers. Unless the speakers get annihilated by a dominant political nation, no language can get extinct. Of course, yes, due to certain political catastrophes, certain communities get scattered throughout the world. There is diaspora because of educational reasons, economic reasons. When the diaspora of a particular community is total, there is possibility of extinction of the language.
So you put it as arithmetical or mathematical wiping off of people that is equally proportional to the wiping off of language.
Yes.
Sir, in a modern age, a human being is becoming increasingly conscious of certain attributes which he himself has no control over. For example, race, racial superiority, that has become the subject of political concern in the modern contemporary world. And with it, we can immediately say language. Language consciousness also is becoming a kind of a source of skirmish, and that, if not controlled properly, can snowball into a big battle and sometimes into a big warfare. Do you favor the concept of global language so that all highs and lows are leveled up?
It's a Platonic concept to have a global language. Of course, in a particular community speaks in the same passion throughout the world right now, but the ratio of that community vis-a-vis the rest of the human race is negligible. For instance, you and I, we talk in, for instance, this picked up English, whatever
borrowed
English. This may be the same in China, this may be the same in Yugoslavia, it may be the same in Africa and other countries, but our ratio to the rest of the human race is almost negligible. So there is no possibility of having a universal language, a global language that would overrun all the smaller languages. For instance, if you observe certain unwritten dialects, unrecorded dialects. Take the dialect of the Gujar community. It is not written. Attempts are being made to write down its literature, but it's not written. They are nomadic people, but still it is so strongly inbuilt in the inner tribe that it is excluded from the outer tribes. So the inner tribe mentality, so long the inner tribe mentality is there, in-group mentality within the Gujar community is there, the language has no possibility of dying out. Because wherever they are a nomadic race. They speak the same Gujar, whether they are in Rajasthan or here in Kashmir or in Pakistan or in Bangladesh. They are the Gujaras, and Gujaras will speak the
So in that
community.
case, do you say that language is the mirror image of one's identity?
Definitely, yes. And then when when there is onslaught, there is danger. It is only the fear psychosis. When you are scared of your neighbor, you assume an identity that is arbitrary, that is not even pleasant to yourself, but you build up, strengthen that identity to be different from your neighbors, because the fear is always there. So when a community is endangered by the surrounding dominant nations, it gets stifled, it becomes more strong, its identity becomes associated with the linguistic identity, because language is the most observable, verifiable characteristic of a communal identity. So when it is so, there is the danger of this linguistic warfare. For instance, in recent times, in recent history, we have had different political developments. Emergence of Bangladesh, it was on the basis of Bangla. Similarly, now Telugu Desam is there, Punjab Khalistan movement was, and so many other movements. They were based on languages, because the community consciously or unconsciously attributed their identity to the manner of speech they have. So this becomes an identity.
So does politics of language also come in applied linguistics by and large? Does it become a part of applied linguistics?
Definitely.
Aren't we going beyond our ambit?
Yeah, definitely yes. For instance, when during the British imperialistic times, when they established English medium schools in the rest of the world, their main thrust was enculturing people. They thought that unless you have an adequate knowledge of English, you are not cultured. So disseminating the knowledge of English was taken as a hallmark of culture. So it was taken as a mark of culture to give you some linguistic competence in a particular language. And so that way it was a part of politics, because while spreading the English language, you spread the
so there's an underlying message that gets rooted through the same language. So how does applied linguistics help us in defining the inherent strengths of a language, so that even if it faces extinction, even if it faces dangers from different sides, it has the capacity and the resilience to stand and survive?
Applied linguistics can help in the fashion, for instance, if we believe that every language is changing, it has to borrow from other languages. Because it is the need of using a language in different contexts, different linguistic situations, that is the guarantee of the success of that language. And the more the linguistic variety, the more various are the linguistic situations, the more colorful becomes that language. For instance, there is a particular language, take an Indian language, Bengali or
any
Punjabi,
other regional
language. When you use it for different purposes, for the purpose of computer knowledge, for the purpose of electronics, for the purpose of this biology, biochemistry and other things, there are different linguistic situations. The language also develops accordingly. And when those linguistic situations are restricted to, for instance, common day-to-day discourse, that language remains stifled, that language remains underdeveloped. But every language has the scope of developing. When it borrows from the neighboring languages and adopts those new words, loan words, according to the phonological, morphological nature of that particular language, that language automatically develops. English is the most successful language of the world, although it is not as big as Mandarin Chinese, but it is the most successful language because it borrows immensely from the rest, all those languages which it comes contact into. When it reaches any far-flung area of Africa, it borrows heavily from that dialect of the smaller races, the tribals and other things, and the English lexicon becomes
and Dr. Johnson comes out with a lexicon that's being remembered even now. Exactly. So since this discussion is primarily meant for students of linguistics, ask a simple question that apparently seems to be very simple for a layman who defines polyglot as the one who knows many languages and linguist as the one who has got specialized in one language or in the language discipline.